Unclear Introduction. Every time he travels, Hong Tao's starting point is not high. This time, he finally turns over and sings as a serf, starting directly with the crown prince in the mid to late Ming dynasty. Unfortunately, this crown prince is a scapegoat and an unlucky person. It is still difficult to overturn the situation, as there are internal party struggles and external Jurchen characters, making it difficult to turn the tide. I'm here in the morning. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. It was late autumn, early in the morning, with a rustling north wind blowing and withered leaves falling. The city was desolate and the streets were deserted, except for the surroundings of the imperial city and the forbidden city, which were different from before. On the gate of Qingtian, flags are fluttering and hunting sounds are heard. On both sides of the Meridian Gate, there are strict ceremonial guards, and Zhuangye is solemn. The flag-bearer guard, Jiang Guard, Jizhou Guard, Fujian Guard, Huban Right Guard, Jinwu Vanguard, Yenshan Vanguard, and Yulin Front Guard have bright armor and imposing authority. Civil and military officials are dressed in formal attire, arranged in order of rank. Inside the Huangji Gate, guards dressed in blue and yellow streamers lined up east and west of the Dan Emperor. In front of the Wenlu and Wulo, the chariots were neatly arranged. Afterwards, the pastoral officials specially selected war horses with consistent fur color and divine posture, and 9 trained tigers and leopards were firmly fixed with iron chains. Suddenly, drums and music were playing together, and 4 officials in Chinese attire led a young man through the Huangji Gate, slowly walking under Emperor Dan. This person has a moderate physique, slightly dark skin, no need for a chin, small eyes, and a delicate face. I don't know if I was intimidated by this grand scene or if I was naturally dull. My eyes were a bit scattered, indicating a slight lack of energy. But his attire was very different. He wore a 9-crown crown on his head, a 9-chapter imperial robe, a black robe, a plain gauze single, for chapters covering his knees, a red belt, red socks and red shoes, and a jade pendant in his hand. There is a system. One of the 4 officials in Chinese attire chanted loudly and for a long time. Kneeling. A similar shout came from the Huangji Hall, and the young man immediately knelt down with a jade pendant in his hand, expressionless, with his head slightly lowered, but the corner of his mouth twitched slightly when his knee touched the blue brick. The eldest son of the emperor, Luo, is the crown prince. Someone loudly recited in the hall, and the young man bent down and kowtowed, slowly standing up. Transmission. System. Finished. With this chant, 4 officials in splendid attire stepped forward and slowly led Crown Prince Luo Yudan up the east side, finally entering the imperial palace through the east gate. Kneeling. As he approached the throne, someone shouted again, and the Crown Prince Luo Ma knelt down. The kneeling time this time was quite long. Someone beside the throne held up a treasure book and read it word by word. After reading it, they handed it over to the standing red-robed old man next to them. The old man appeared to be in his 60s or 70s. He walked up to the young man and knelt on both knees, holding the treasure book in his hands. His expression was very solemn, and his eyes were full of anticipation. However, Prince Luo's face remained expressionless. He took the treasure book in a proper manner and handed it over to the inner official behind him. He raised the jade pendant and bowed to the throne again. Then, guided by the inner official, he slowly walked out of the main hall and solemnly bowed 5 times under the guidance of Emperor Dan. At this moment, the sound of drums suddenly rose, and the inner officials carried the treasure pavilion containing the collection of gold treasures. Under the watchful eyes of the ceremonial guards and civil and military officials, they left the Huangji Gate and returned to the eastern palace through the Huiji Gate on the east side. Next, Crown Prince Luo will enter the central palace to express his gratitude to the Empress, then visit the ancestral temple and pay respects to his ancestors, officially becoming the Crown Prince. This is a ceremony for the Emperor to confer the title of Crown Prince. Preparation began at the beginning of the month, and after 2 rehearsals, it was officially completed today. It is announced to the whole world that there will be successors to the imperial court. At this time, it was the 10th day of the 10th lunar month in the 29th year of the Wanli reign, November 4, 1601. Emperor Zhu Yijuan was the chubby middle-aged man sitting on the throne of the Huangji Hall, wearing 12 imperial crowns and 12 official robes. He was the third son of Zhu Ziyuan, Emperor Muzong of the Ming dynasty. At the age of 5, he was appointed as the crown prince, and at the age of 9, he became the young emperor. His reign title was Wanli, and he has been sitting steadily on the throne for 30.8 years. The young man with a dull expression, a moderate figure, and slightly dark skin is called Zhu Changluo, the eldest son of Emperor Wanli. Compared to his father who ascended to the throne early on, his life seemed to be more complicated, as he had just become the crown prince at the age of 19. In fact, he hasn't been doing very well in the past 19 years. Although he may seem like the grand eldest son, his birth mother came from a palace-maid background and was often neglected in the palace. If it weren't for the fact that the current Empress Dowager also comes from a palace-maid background and often speaks out to protect her, she probably wouldn't even have had the opportunity to grow up. Since Zheng, the favored concubine of Emperor Wanli, gave birth to Prince Zhu Changshuan 15 years ago, his situation has become even more awkward. Not only was he not liked by his father, but he also became a hidden obstacle for his younger brother to further advance. According to the rules set by the Emperor of Illumination, the first choice for a crown prince is the legitimate eldest son, who is the first son born to the Empress. But the Empress of Wanli did not give birth to a son, and in order, it was her eldest son. It's true that Zhu Changluo is the eldest son, but Emperor Wanli prefers his third son Zhu Changshuan and tries every means to delay the appointment of the crown prince. It was not until Zhu Changluo was 19 years old that he reluctantly nodded under the advice of court officials, Empress Dowager, and Empress Dowager time and time again. Although they are father and son, the royal family has always been ruthless, making a middle-aged emperor grit his teeth and accept his fate is obviously not a good thing. As the saying goes, if you are not afraid of thieves stealing, then you are afraid of thieves thinking about you. Even if the newly revealed crown prince is caught by the emperor for any mistake, his status may still be uncertain. But Zhu Changluo couldn't control all of this, let alone actively express his unwillingness to become the crown prince. In that way, not only will it fail to serve the purpose of humility, but it will also be abandoned by the courtiers and harem who have always supported it, and the consequences will be even more tragic when seeking the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com. In fact, he really doesn't want to be the crown prince. It's not an affectation, but a clear understanding of the historical trend. Zhu Changluo did indeed become the 14th emperor in the history of the Ming dynasty, but he was poisoned and killed by someone after only 30 days of reign, with the temple name Guangzong. Listen, Guang, as the name suggests, lived with fear for 38 years and was remembered for 19 years in the position of crown prince. Finally, he endured his father's death and left empty-handed before his buttocks even heated up. It's not a big deal, Jingguang. I have to say that ancient people really knew how to name. To ask Zhu Changluo why he knew about something that happened more than a decade later, there is only one explanation besides being able to connect with ghosts and gods. He crossed over from later generations and is classified as soul-piercing. This body is still owned by the eldest son Zhu Changluo, but the soul has been occupied by a semi-professional traveler who passively travels back and forth in time and space hundreds of years later since the age of 1. This person's name is Hong Tao, with the courtesy name Pippi and the nickname Mouse. 18 years ago, he led the last wave of zombies to be surrounded by human forces in the Arctic Circle of East Siberia, a full 100 years after the outbreak of zombie disease. Humanity gradually established more than 10 countries under the threat of zombie swarms, while several companions who followed him in commanding the zombie swarms fell one after another in the large-scale counterattacks launched by humans. No matter who you are, find a better identity this time. Hong Tao knew that another crossing was coming, but the target was not yet clear as he watched the bombers drop a series of incendiary bombs above his head. He has a wish that he doesn't want to be forced to start from scratch anymore. In the past few times, besides fishermen, they were all ordinary people, and after finally becoming a son-in-law, they were still the cowards of the Song dynasty. If the journey really cannot be stopped and the destination cannot be controlled, it is best to set the starting point higher, such as having money, power, and influence. Second Prince. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When he opened his eyes again and listened to the conversation between the two women in front of him, dressed in ancient splendid costumes, he quickly figured out which dynasty he had come to and who he had traveled to. Then he sprayed out all the curse words in his memory, including Chinese, English, Japanese, French, Russian, German, and Latin. Wow, wow. Unfortunately, no matter how hard you try, there is always only one sound that can be emitted from your mouth, the crying of a baby. Later, when he remembered this, Hong Tao felt relieved again. It seemed that he couldn't blame those guys in the sky either. If he wanted to blame them, he had to blame himself for not expressing his prayers clearly before his death. When it comes to wealth, power, and influence, who can match the emperors of ancient China? The requirements have indeed been met, but unfortunately the emperor is not the same as the emperor. For example, the cheap father of this lifetime, Emperor Wanli, reigned for 48 years. For example, Zhu Changluo, the eldest son of the emperor who possessed himself, only reigned for 30 days. One heaven and one earth. As the ancient said, people die more than people, and goods are thrown away more than goods. Hong Tao has never been too conflicted, he can always find a reason for liberation in everything. This time is no exception, the shouting and crying subsided in a short while, and I also wanted to relax. Compared to many princes who have never been emperors in history, I seem to be a little stronger. Anyway, at least 30 days of emperor addiction have passed. What if I were to travel to Chongzhen and truly become an emperor for over a decade? Watching the building collapse, my mind was full of solutions, my whole body was full of abilities, but I could only watch the country collapse and die. There is too little time to change anything. Now, it has been several decades since the Qing army entered the border, and the country still has a bit more vitality than at the time of Chongzhen. If we can carefully plan and make good use of it, there may be some help. Of course, there is still not enough time left for oneself. No matter how anxious you are, no abnormal behavior is allowed before the age of 15, otherwise your life is likely to be in danger, and there is nothing else to say. At this point, there is only one word, which is tolerance. As the saying goes, put a knife at the beginning of the word endure. This word is easy to say and write, but not easy to achieve. After Zhu Changluo was born, he rarely saw his father. Even though Emperor Wanli had to admit his son under the pressure of the Empress Dowager, he never paid attention. The Qidong Palace where the mother and son lived has become a truly cold palace, not only without care, but also with the lowest cost among all the harems. Fortunately, before Consort Gong was elected to the palace, she only came from a lower-ranking military officer family and was not spoiled. She didn't feel too uncomfortable living in a more difficult life. Zhu Changluo, possessed by Hong Tao, is more sensible. He never cries or makes a fuss when there are no outsiders around, saving his already unfortunate birth mother a lot of trouble. In the eyes of outsiders, the eldest son of the emperor, Zhu Changluo, was an unlucky child who lacked fatherly love, teachings from great scholars, had a dull personality, a gentle temper, was not good at speaking, and had no sense of existence since childhood. But Hong Tao can endure and is also good at enduring. For those who only accompany zombies on the Siberian wilderness every day, as long as they can live normally in the human world, it can be considered a great wealth of material resources. Even if they are trapped in a cold palace, their living standards are still much higher than those of the grassland people outside. As for the spiritual aspect, the birth mother Wang and the eunuchs and palace maids in Qidong Palace may feel that their fate is unfair, their future is hopeless, and they are lonely and cold, but Hong Tao will not. He spends all his time reading and practicing calligraphy, except for dealing with necessary tasks. From time to time, holding candles until very late not only makes me feel bored, but also often laments that time waits for no one and time flies. It took about 7 years for Hong Tao to come up with a plan for the next 100 years, which not only had a general direction but also specific details. From consolidating one's position step by step to gradually seizing power, and then to how to deal with internal and external enemies, it covers everything. But having a plan alone is far from enough. After all, anyone can talk on paper and take action to achieve it. But as a prince growing up in the deep palace, his actions are extremely difficult. As long as there is a slight abnormality, the eunuchs and palace maids around will secretly report it. To avoid them, they need an opportunity, such as conferring the title of crown prince. According to the regulations of the Ming dynasty, after the prince was conferred the title of crown prince or king, he could no longer live in the harem and needed to go out and live in 8 mansions and open yamen. Although the crown prince is different from other feudal lords and still cannot do without the forbidden city, he can also live alone without the harem. Even though the Eastern Palace is located within the forbidden city, it is still easier to come into contact with people and things outside, or rather necessary to do so, compared to the Qidong Palace. As a crown prince, whether the emperor is willing or not, he cannot completely control the growth of the crown prince. In order to make the crown prince more in line with the definition of the emperor, courtiers will desperately demand that he be equipped with qualified teachers, accompanying readers, and officials from the Eastern Palace, gradually involving the crown prince in the handling of national affairs, further familiarizing himself with the workflow, and preparing for a certain day in the future. Hong Tao understands these principles, but it is still unclear how to operate and prepare. It's not that there is a lack of historical knowledge, but rather that this kind of thing is too secretive and obscure. It's difficult to see the whole picture without experiencing it firsthand. After all, the Ming and Song dynasties are completely different. Wang En. But it's okay if I don't know. We can ask. Qian Suiyi, I'm here. Upon hearing this, one person urged the horse to catch up a few steps and bowed his head in response. How to arrange the trivial matters in the palace. Hong Tao also slowed down his horses and walked side by side, ready to listen attentively. This middle-aged man, wearing a blue robe and a 3-mountain crown, has a fair face and a slightly emaciated figure. He speaks calmly and softly, with a slightly hoarse voice that seems to lack some vitality. However, his eyes are very agile. He is a eunuch, also known as a eunuch. In the 22nd year of the Wanli reign, he was assigned by the emperor to the Qidong Palace as an accompanying reader. Along with the appointment of the crown prince, he was also appointed as the head of the Imperial Seal Bureau, with a rank of 5th grade. When I first arrived, I didn't take him seriously. I thought it was another unlucky person whose grandmother didn't care about his uncle and didn't love him, or who offended some palace powers who were blind and kicked into the cold palace to endure time. After all, the status of Qidong Palace is very low, and it is not an exaggeration to say it is a cold palace. The eunuchs and palace maids sent here to work are either hopeless or old, weak, sick, and disabled. After spending some time together, Hong Tao realized that this guy was a bit different. Within a few months, he beat a eunuch to half disability and even strangled 2 palace maids. The reason is simple: hands and feet are not clean. But Hong Tao understood in his heart that there were no valuable items to exchange for money in Qidong Palace, except for the few imperial gifts his biological mother had. These 3 eunuchs and palace maids are also stealing words, eavesdropping. Whenever I talk to my biological mother, people often eavesdrop outside, which has been the norm for over a decade. Empress Wang Gongfei is relatively honest and unaware of this, but she can only pretend not to know. Although he is the eldest son of the emperor, apart from the Empress Dowager and the Empress, he can still see each other in the eye and bring some clothes to eat and drink during festivals, leaving almost no one interested in the vast palace. Eunuchs and palace maids also have insight, and it is clear at a glance who is in high demand and who is in decline. Faced with such a prince who is not favored by the emperor, I dare not say that he deliberately bullied him, and being ignored and treated slowly is definitely inevitable. It is even more common for someone with a more lively mind to embrace and serve Empress Zheng in advance, paving the way for her future career. Triple-hearted abdomen. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Unfortunately, their vision is too short-sighted and their experience is limited. They cannot see that even the emperor himself cannot completely disregard the wishes of the courtiers when it comes to the issue of appointing a crown prince, nor can he unreasonably violate the laws and regulations of his ancestors. As the eldest son of the emperor, he not only has the hope of becoming a crown prince, but also has great potential. As the old saying goes, if you have no foresight, you will have immediate worries. If you don't, your life will be lost in vain. As the lowest-level eunuchs and palace maids in the Forbidden City, I often die without anyone asking about it. Not to mention Shangda Tianting, I guess even the head of the harem wouldn't bother to pay attention. After this incident, Hong Tao began to quietly pay attention to the eunuch named Wang An. Finally, he learned some information from the palace maids beside the empress, and then he knew who he was. Wang An, from Xiongxian County, Baoding Prefecture, Hebei Province, entered the palace at the age of 8 to pay his respects under the supervision of the imperial horse supervisor Zhou Pingmen. I don't know who Zhou Ping is, Hong Tao, but Zhou Ping's master is very famous. He is the eunuch Feng Bao, who is in charge of the Ministry of Rites. In his previous life, Hong Tao had nothing to do in the small courtyard. He rode an electric tricycle through the streets and collected many old books, piled up a bed full of them, and read each book at least once, covering various aspects such as literature, history, economy, technology, etc. Apart from passing the time, the fundamental reason is still preparing for the next journey. After traveling back to ancient times for the first 2 times, I lacked understanding of the culture, historical events, and emperors and ministers of that time. I was even more clueless in the collection of ancient classics, poems, songs, and prose, making it difficult to integrate into society. Although after nearly a decade of recharging, I still cannot reach the level of fully reading poetry in books, nor can I practice calligraphy well, nor can I recite poetry correctly. However, I have not worked hard either. At least, I have accumulated enough knowledge for the celebrities of historical dynasties, and can barely be considered a second-hand history enthusiast. Those who are familiar with the history of the Ming dynasty cannot avoid one person, Zhang Juzhen, the head of the Wanli dynasty cabinet. This chief minister assisted the emperors of the Jiajing and Wanli dynasties in carrying out reforms and achieved significant results, known as the revival of Wanli in history. However, with the high-level structure of the Ming dynasty, it is far from enough to have only the head of the cabinet and the emperor carry out reforms, because there is also a very important lubrication institution, the Imperial Academy, sandwiched between them. Feng Bao is the eunuch leader who cooperates well with Zhang Juzhen both internally and externally, at least not much of a hindrance. I don't know if he is also a fellow villager from Hebei. Wang An had a smooth start after entering the palace. In the 6th year of the Wanli reign, when he was just 10 years old, he was recommended to study at the Inner Book Hall, which was a place specifically designed to improve the cultural level of eunuchs and a necessary path to enter the Imperial Academy. Originally, Ming Taizu Zhu Yuanzhang firmly opposed eunuch literacy, but since Zhu Di ascended the throne, this rule has been broken. Compared to the civil servant group that always competes for power and profit with the emperor, the stubborn Emperor Yongla prefers to use obedient eunuchs to do things, and has passed down this tradition along with genes. The cultural level of eunuchs is generally low, which seriously hinders the efficiency of serving the emperor. As soon as Emperor Xuande came to power, he immediately established the Inner Book Hall, specifically designed to cultivate senior eunuchs who could read and write. Since it is a product specifically used by the emperor to balance the civil service group, the starting point must not be low. The Inner Book Hall admits 200 to 300 young Huang men who are over 10 years old each period, and is managed by the Imperial Academy. The Hanlin Academy's bachelor is invited as the lecturer. After 5 years of hard study and passing the imperial examination, only those with excellent results can graduate, known as the Imperial Academy of Internal Officials. Graduating from the Inner Academy is not easy, and those with excellent grades are usually arranged to enter the 6th Science Corridor to copy official documents for a period of time, which is somewhat like an internship period. Those who perform well will be selected to join the literary study or go to accompany the Crown Prince in reading. The former is likely to become the official seal and pen holder of the Ministry of Rights in the future, while the latter is a reliable vassal of the Crown Prince and has a promising future. Of course, Wang Yan's ability to become his accompanying reader did not seem like grace at the time, but more like a form of hairdressing, which was also related to his master Feng Bao. After Zhang Juzheng fell, Feng Bao also followed suit and ate melons. Although Xia Wangman had to recognize their master when they first entered the palace, Wang Yan was just a child at the time and didn't understand the bullshit. It couldn't be said that he was a follower of anyone, but after all, it was reasonable and well suited to be excluded from the cold palace to study with the equally unpopular eldest son. As the saying goes, 30 years in the east and 30 years in the west. As a mortal, I really don't know which cloud in the sky has rain underneath. The heavens did not make Wang Yan wait for 30 years. In just 7 years, he threw half of the pie and accurately hit him on the head. With the Crown Prince being conferred the title of Crown Prince, he naturally became the attendant of the Eastern Palace. Half of his foot had already stepped into the threshold of the Imperial Household Department. As long as he could ensure the Crown Prince's safe and secure succession to the throne, his future must be bright. Whether it is good or bad depends not only on external factors, but also on one's own satisfaction with it. From the current perspective, after 7 years of daily interaction, I am basically satisfied. As an accompanying reader, Wang Yan not only completed his job but also exceeded it. It is precisely because of his existence that Qidong Palace, although still a cold palace with no improvement in treatment, is no longer filled with holes like before. Both eunuchs and palace maids have become more orderly and orderly. The most important thing is the sense of security. Orphans and widows not only lack care, but also are surrounded by a group of people with ulterior motives all day long. Those who have not experienced it must be unable to imagine the feeling of anxiety. Even a monster like Hong Tao, who can continue to travel even after death, has suddenly woken up countless nights, feeling like there are 2 eyes staring at him inside the house, and there may even be a knife or a rope, looking for the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com to kill himself anytime and anywhere. But when it comes to full trust, that's still a long way off. In addition to necessary precautions, Hong Tao also vaguely remembers that Wang Yan had a relationship with the notorious Ming dynasty eunuch Wei Zhongxian in history. I really can't remember what kind of relationship it is. Currently, there are no prominent eunuchs in the palace named Wei Zhongxian. Anyway, after enduring 19 years of hard work in the cold palace, I finally managed to make a name for myself today, and I have someone around me who can barely handle me. Congratulations. Long Live Lord has arranged for officials such as Zhou Yi, Li Shi, and Wang Guotai to accompany His Highness, and they are now waiting in the palace. Wang Yan still maintains his calm and composed tone, and is not overjoyed by becoming the Crown Prince's accompanying reader. Are you familiar with these 3 people? As expected, the tide rose and the ship rose. For 7 years, there was only one accompanying reader by my side, and I immediately tripled my title as Crown Prince. However, Hong Tao doesn't think it's a good thing to have too many people around him. Among the 3 people, there must be eyeliner sent by the Emperor, the Empress or Princess Sheng, maybe both. Zhou Yi, Wang Guotai, and Li Shi all come from the inner study, and I have never met before. It seems that Wang Yan has already inquired about the origins of the 3 new accompanying readers, but it is only preliminary, or he doesn't want to say more. For 19 years, Hong Tao never took the initiative to inquire about any palace affairs. To be dull, one must have a dull appearance. To pretend, one must put on a complete set. If one were to inquire about everything and not say a word, they might not be able to live to where they are today. But after becoming the crown prince and taking control of the Eastern Palace, in addition to adding some officials and eunuchs from the Zhanshi prefecture, there will also be at least one reputable civil servant who will teach the 4 books and 5 classics. Usually, this position is held by the editors of the Hanlin Academy or cabinet scholars. 4 understandings. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Although it may seem like a part-time job, it can reflect the attitude of the civil service group. If only a few editors take turns giving lectures, it is clear that the civil service group does not attach much importance to the crown prince. If there is a cabinet grand secretary, the level of attention will be much higher. If the prime minister can come in person, the position of crown prince will be considered stable for the time being, which also indicates that the prime minister has a small expectation in his heart and plans to approach Zhang Juzheng infinitely, hoping that one day he can monopolize power. Speaking of the Ming dynasty, Hong Tao's previous understanding was entirely obtained through reading books. I thought the emperors of this dynasty were all weird, and there was basically no normal one from beginning to end. And this dynasty was a turning point for Chinese civilization, gradually entering a downward slope thereafter. The founding emperor Zhu Yuanzhang started his career with the Red Turban Army. What is the Red Turban Army? White Lotus Sect. What is the White Lotus Sect? In modern terms, it is Crab Feet. And he is not yet the boss in Crab Feet, he can only be considered one of the boss's few thugs, and his most skilled skill in the early stage is to hide in the corner to save strength. Others were busy fighting against the Yuan army. Lu Fudong fought all the way from Hunan to Mongolia, then from Mongolia to the northeast, and finally rushed into the Korean peninsula with his hands. When he was in trouble, Zhu Yuanzhang did not support his immediate superior, but instead suppressed himself and occupied territory in the south with explosive troops. When Lu Fudong died in battle and Han Liner, an orphan and widowed mother, was helpless, he ran over and pretended to lend a helping hand, using tiger skin as a big flag, continuing to use Lu Fudong's banner for both ends, but still did not actively seek the Yuan army to fight. I am quite enthusiastic about taking advantage of the emptiness in the rear of other rebel forces and going over to give them a cold shoulder. After passing the developmental stage and becoming a strong soldier, Han Liner, the nominal leader, appeared to be a bit in the way. He simply sent his subordinates to drown on the way under the guise of receiving someone. The person in charge of picking up and dropping off Han Liner's mother and son is named Liao Yongzhong. He came from a naval background and led a fleet to the inner lake, but unexpectedly, a capsizing occurred. He even overturned Han Liner's boat, and the whole ship was stunned, but not a single one was saved. It can be said to be accidental. After all, there is no evidence to prove that it was instigated by Zhu Yuanzhang. But according to universal logical reasoning, this matter is a bit suspicious. Let's first take a look at the fate of Liao Yongzhong. This founding hero, whose military achievements are comparable to those of Feng Sheng and Fu Yud, was executed shortly after the establishment of the Ming dynasty due to illegal clothing. It is difficult to escape the speculation of killing people and silencing their mouths. After killing Han Liner, old Zhu still didn't go north to find trouble with the Yuan dynasty. Instead, he first annihilated all the other branches of the Red Turban Army to the east, south, and west. The reason is that those people rebelled against the Yuan dynasty, and he became a staunch supporter of the Yuan dynasty. In fact, when Lao Zhu dominated the south of the Yangtze River alone, the Yuan dynasty in the north had become a pot of porridge. Even Emperor Shun of the Yuan dynasty could not command him, so he simply rolled up his bedding and ran back to the grassland. It only took Zhu Yuanzhang 8 months to push from south to north, and there was hardly any decent resistance along the way except for Luoyang. And the Yuan dynasty was not eradicated, only voluntarily retreated to the grasslands, known as the Northern Yuan dynasty. The Northern Yuan regime existed throughout the Ming dynasty and occasionally caused trouble for the Ming dynasty. It was not until more than 200 years later that it was destroyed by the later Jin dynasty. In a few years, the Ming dynasty also perished in the later Jin dynasty, making it a difficult situation. After the founding of the country, Lao Zhu didn't do anything for a period of time. He focused on figuring out what charges to use to kill the founding heroes who followed him to fight the world, and indeed did so. The cruelty of the means and the vastness of the quantity are unprecedented. It seems not enough to describe them as harsh and ungrateful. When starting a business together, there is nothing to be said about enduring hardships, except that we cannot enjoy happiness together. As long as the business is successful, we will start to fight with each other immediately. As long as we are not completely the final say, we always feel that we are losing. If we don't kill these old comrades who are full of bones and have special combat experience, old Zhu, who regards the country as his own homestead, will definitely not be able to eat well or sleep. I'm afraid that one day if I kick my leg, the imperial power won't pass to my children and grandchildren, and even if I force it down, I won't be able to sit still. Every minute, I'll have to be snatched away by the arrogant soldiers and fierce generals who follow me to fight the country. Some uncles and nephews went in with white knives for family property, some came out with red knives, some brothers, you took me down, I took you down again, some didn't talk to courtiers for more than a decade, some didn't go to court for decades, some used tiger and wolf medicine as sugar beans to eat, some made themselves immortal by refining pills, oh yes. And there's also myself who was the crown prince for 20 years and died just 1 month after ascending the throne. Father-son suspicion, sibling violence, harem politics, eunuch power, and endless party struggles are simply a vivid human nature map, full of ugliness. In addition, the frequent beheading of ministers, taking off their pants and spanking, kneeling when talking to superiors, and promoting mosquito fishing have directly broken the bones of the elite class in China, setting many extremely bad precedents. From then on, in a high-risk environment where political differences lead to death, fewer and fewer people are telling the truth, and more people are pondering what they love to hear. Courtiers are willing to do whatever they want, because doing practical things can easily lead to mistakes. Once they make mistakes, they will be accused by others, making them very passive. There is also the use of scientific examinations to constrain the thinking of intellectuals. Under these rules, if one wants to stand out, they must constantly memorize the prescribed content from a young age. They are not allowed to ask why, as anyone who questions others is considered a great rebellion. Without thinking, one cannot speak the truth and do practical things. It is strange that such a dynasty will progress. That is to say, it was a good time. The Mongolians were busy with internal conflicts and had no time to go south. The other nomadic tribes were either too far away or too weak, otherwise they wouldn't have had to wait for the Manchus to go south and would have disappeared long ago. Compared to various historical periods, the Ming dynasty lacked the grandeur compatible with the Tang dynasty, the developed commerce of the Song dynasty, and the diverse culture of the spring and autumn period. Not to mention the development of technology, even poetry and prose are on a downward trend. Compared to the 8 great masters of the Tang and Song dynasties, the culture of the Ming dynasty is generally good and commendable. Compared to the world, Europe has liberated its minds through the Renaissance and is emerging from the dark Middle Ages, beginning the era of great navigation. Strong ships and cannons have arrived at their doorstep. Da Vinci is pondering the gearbox, Galileo is holding up his invented telescope to observe the solar system, Copernicus believes that the Earth is not the center of the universe, Bruno is fearless of life and death in order to uphold the truth. Most of these views are shared by Hong Tao, except that he believes that the emperors of the Ming dynasty were not necessarily all abnormal. After living in the Forbidden City for more than 10 years, witnessing it with one's own eyes for more than 10 years, being deeply influenced and experiencing it firsthand, I have gained my own insights into certain things. Why do you say that? Look at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com because I saw a living example, which is my cheap father and the Wanli Emperor Zhu Yijuan who did not go to court for 20 years. He is not lazy or foolish, but helpless. On the surface, Emperor Wanli appeared to be a young emperor. At the age of 5, he was conferred the title of Crown Prince and ascended the throne at the age of 10. Coincidentally, he met the capable minister Zhang Juzheng and the less arrogant official Feng Bao as his assistant. He had a smooth sailing and outstanding performance until the age of 20. Over the past decade, the Ming dynasty not only had a full treasury and a stable political situation, but also did not suffer losses in foreign wars. Troops were dispatched to quell the rebellion of the Mongols, and to help North Korea completely repel Toyotomi Hideyoshi's invasion. Last year, they also defeated the rebellion of the Miao chieftain. But the surface glory cannot conceal the inner restlessness of Emperor Wanli. Since he ascended the throne at the age of 10, rather than running the country with Zhang Juzheng, it is Empress Dowager Li and Zhang Juzheng who control the direction of the country inside and outside. The young emperor and Feng Baoquan are supporting role. Throughout history, emperors who have no water in their minds understand a truth. They must seize power. If the power of courtiers is too strong, big problems will eventually arise, and Zhang Juzheng is the key to this problem. When Empress Dowager Li was already old and no longer concerned about court affairs, the fully pro-ruling Emperor Wanli suddenly realized that his position was reversed from that of the head consort. To do anything, Zhang Juzheng nodded and had to constantly help wipe his buttocks to cope with the dissatisfaction of the civil and military officials in the court. If Zhang Juzheng did not die, Emperor Wanli may continue to endure. After all, I have been neglected since childhood and have long been accustomed to the teacher's domineering behavior. I don't have enough courage and ability to resist. But when Zhang Juzheng died, a huge vacuum of power appeared, and Emperor Wanli, like a graduating student, happily began to seize power. The liquidation of Zhang Juzheng and Feng Bao is a declaration of the return of great power to the hands of the emperor. 5 Experiences 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As the saying goes, if I had known to wet the Kong, I should have slept through a sieve. Not long after, Emperor Wanli realized that it was not difficult to seize power, but it was difficult to maintain stability. There are not many trusted ministers in the entire court, all trying to educate themselves on how to act according to their beliefs. In other words, they all want to be Zhang Juzheng. What about the inner palace? Bringing up this matter is another brainwave of litigation. Empress Dowager Li has a violent temper and has been extremely strict in her upbringing since childhood. After Emperor Wanli reached adulthood, she could no longer manage the affairs of the outer court, but she still did not relax her control over the inner palace. The legitimate empress's surname is Wang and her name is Shijie. Her father is the deputy envoy of the Ministry of Works and the 9th rank official. Her ancestral home is Yuyao County, Shaoxing Prefecture, Zhejiang Province, and she was born in Daxing County, Shuntian Prefecture, Northern Jili. It is reasonable for Zhu Yuanzhang to stipulate that the legitimate wives and concubines of emperors and feudal lords were not allowed to marry wealthy and influential families, which to some extent prevented external relatives from interfering in politics. But, the term household registration not only applies to the common people, but also to the emperor. Emperor Wanli really doesn't have much emotion towards Wang Shijie. In modern terms, it should be described as having different aspirations and paths, no common aspirations, and no common language. Just thinking about it, a girl from a small family was selected to enter the palace at the age of 13 or 14, and most of them were good at recognizing characters. Emperor Wanli, on the other hand, was a very intelligent person who loved to read books and read everything from a young age. Two people with completely different personalities, experiences, and hobbies suddenly became husband and wife, unable to hide or leave. They had to work hard and have children, and the experience was not very pleasant. At this moment, a naive and knowledgeable woman entered the emperor's life. In the words of Emperor Wanli himself, it is called soft and beautiful jade, graceful and elegant orchid. Simply put, it means being smart and lively, knowing books and good at painting, throwing tantrums, and having some conversations. She is Jing Shupin, who was granted the title of Empress Dowager a year later and a noble consort after giving birth to a prince. If Emperor Wanli had not slept the palace maids who were serving his mother while drunk, and had given birth to the eldest son Zhu Changluo the following year, the prince born to concubine Zheng 4 years later would have had to become a 100% crown prince, and there would have been less trouble afterwards. Emperor Wanli genuinely liked Empress Zheng from the bottom of his heart, but Empress Wang was very responsible in her character, not quarreling or causing trouble, showing filial piety to her in-laws. Apart from not being able to give birth to a prince, her entire body was the standard of an empress, and she could not be easily deposed. And the empress and empress dowager were all determined, clinging to ancestral teachings and insisting on standing tall. For this reason, Empress Dowager Li even vaguely mentioned calling back the younger brother of Emperor Wanli, Prince Lu Zhuilio. The meaning is very obvious. The Empress Dowager has the ability and conditions to depose the emperor. If anyone dares to procrastinate on the issue of establishing a crown prince, don't blame the old lady for turning her back and not recognizing anyone. Anyway, both King Lu and Emperor Wanli are her biological descendants. It's the same who becomes the emperor. Look at this old lady who is so powerful, straightforward, and has a lot of opinions and skills. No wonder she can cooperate with Zhang Juzheng both internally and externally. Even if she is a little hesitant, she can't keep up with the pace. Emperor Wanli originally wanted to persuade his mother, but the reason was simple. Zhu Changluo was born to a palace maid and his background was not very honorable. The result was not bad, but upon hearing these words, Empress Dowager Li immediately turned her back and cursed her son for being unfilial. Because she used to be a palace maid, she used to curse the bald man in front of a monk. After countless efforts, I found a big basket of excuses, but neither the courtiers nor my family can understand or support the emperor's choice, let alone stand alone and do things according to their own ideas. So Emperor Wanli went to another extreme. Since he was all against me, no one would feel comfortable. I won't do whatever you say. Don't just chatter and lecture people all day. I won't even go to morning court. From now on, live one day at a time, no matter how comfortable you are, who wouldn't mind coming to the harem to find me? Once a person despair of reality, they don't want to do anything serious at all. In the words of later generations, Emperor Wanli lay flat and let all the countries and states play with their eggs, just be so stubborn. Of course, the emperor lying flat is different from the people lying flat. He just doesn't go to court and doesn't participate in various ceremonial activities. The most basic work still needs to be done, such as reviewing notebooks and memorials. But they rarely meet with cabinet members to discuss national affairs, and there is an extreme lack of communication. When it comes to the work of the Ming Dynasty Emperor, Hong Tao must have the right to speak. Even if he lived in a cold palace for more than 10 years, he was not well liked and had to meet with the emperor several times a year for the sake of etiquette. Sometimes in the garden, sometimes in the dormitory, sometimes in the office. How to put it, saying it's tiring is indeed tiring, and saying it's not tiring is also not tiring. According to the different states of each emperor, the specific situation needs to be analyzed in detail. Due to the abolition of the prime minister by Zhu Yuanzhang, which means there is no national prime minister, cabinet ministers can only be considered as senior secretaries and staff officers, without the power to make decisions. All major and minor matters at home and abroad ultimately have to be decided by the emperor alone. As the founding emperor, Zhu Yuanzhang did this to preserve as much power as possible for future generations. Whether it would be beneficial for the long-term stability of the country or not, his level and vision cannot be seen so far. According to the situation at that time, there was not much exposure to the drawbacks, because Zhu Yuanzhang had suffered from hardships since childhood and was also the founding ruler. He had a high morale and worked 10 hours a day, reviewing hundreds of memorials without feeling too bitter. He gritted his teeth and could still hold back. But he forgot a truth that his ancestors had summarized over thousands of years. It is easy to go from frugality to luxury, and it is difficult to go from luxury to frugality. He is able to discipline himself and work hard because being an emperor, no matter how hard or tiring, is more comfortable than living among the lower class. At least he won't starve to death due to disasters, so he doesn't feel too uncomfortable. But the next generation, were born with a golden key in the Forbidden City from a young age. As a prince, none of them are luxurious, and even if they are not pampered, they cannot endure hardship. No one can work too long every day voluntarily like him. The problem now is that as the country grows and the system becomes more complete, the workload not only does not decrease but also increases. The emperor's energy is limited, even though every generation of emperors is as hardworking as Zhu Yuanzhang, they still can't get busy looking for a book garden. www.zhaozhuyuan.com. What should I do if I'm too busy? Ming Qingzu Zhu Di came up with an alternative plan and organized literate eunuchs to help screen memorials. First, organize according to categories, and then prioritize according to content, which can greatly improve efficiency and reduce workload. Over time, these eunuchs who helped screen memorials changed their original temporary nature and became the emperor's private confidential secretaries, specifically reviewing the notebooks and memorials submitted by the cabinet and courtiers for the emperor. The famous eunuchs emerged. The so-called eunuchs holding pens and holding seals are both positions within the imperial household department. The eunuch Bingbai is responsible for assisting the emperor in giving instructions on the memorial, while the eunuch Pomprint is responsible for the final review and stamping. To put it simply, these eunuchs are equivalent to the secretaries of later great leaders. If the people below want to report their work, they must not directly call the leader's mobile phone, nor wander into the office, let alone find their home. The only way is to contact the secretary first, and then the secretary will relay it to the leader, and finally arrange a time. As the saying goes, it's easy for the king of hell to deal with little ghosts. Normally, a secretary does not have public authority, but as a leader's confidant, sometimes it is equivalent to the leader's eyes, mouth, and hands, and sometimes it simply replaces the leader's brain. Emperor Wanli lay flat, but the imperial household department did not lie flat with him. There should be no shortage of notebooks and memorials to be sent inside, and the emperor should also give approval, which will not delay a day. Of course, the vast majority of them may have been reviewed by eunuchs holding pens instead, and after that, key points will be briefly mentioned. This situation is a bit like a couple fighting, some people are noisy, some people are not noisy, play cold and violent, but life still has to be lived. It's just that nobody pays attention to anyone. Over time, it will inevitably hurt the relationship, which is not good for both parties and the family, and even more troublesome than arguing. Liudong Palace. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Everything has two sides, and neither Emperor Wanli nor his ministers paid attention to each other. On the contrary, Zhu Changluo, the crown prince with an awkward status, breathed a little sigh of relief. Cheap Dad is too lazy to take care of the country, so naturally he doesn't have time to pay attention to the crown prince's daily life, and neglect has become lenient. The court ministers had no good way to deal with the emperor, and instead placed more emphasis on the cultivation of the crown prince. After all, they don't want the next emperor to follow suit and must be prepared to instill enough ideas in the crown prince in advance. There is only one way to achieve this goal, which is to have a feast. Shen Gulao did not explicitly state. Wang An answered quite quickly. Wang An, we have been guarding each other in the palace for 7 years. If we can't stay in Qicheng, then these 7 years will be in vain. But Hong Tao heard that his answer was not complete, and he seemed to have left a small tail behind. I dare not. Shen Gulao did not explicitly state it, but Zhu Gulao said that he would only arrange to give lectures in the pavilion after his wedding. Upon hearing such a serious warning, Wang An quickly defended himself. Let them go. When it comes to getting married, according to tradition, the eldest son should get married around the age of 15. Now that I am almost 20 years old, I just mentioned getting married, which shows the awkward situation. Hong Tao neither dislikes nor desires marriage, nor feels any shame at all. Do as the Romans do when in Rome, having multiple wives is not necessarily a bad thing. Of course, if possible, it's best not to do it, but unfortunately, it doesn't count if I say it myself. Since she can't resist, there's no need to bother with calculations. The crown princess can chat more about her temper, and if she doesn't, she can treat each other with respect. This kind of thing may be troublesome for Emperor Wanli, but for someone like me who has traveled N times and seen beautiful women from all over the world, there is nothing wrong with it. Ha! Drive! Drive! Wang let out a long sigh as he watched the crown prince galloping his horse not far ahead, urging his horse to catch up. Accompanied for 7 years, I have thought countless times about the situation where the eldest son of the emperor will become the crown prince one day. However, when things come to an end, not only is there no joy in fulfilling my wishes, but also some anxiety. Just now, the crown prince's expression and gaze seemed to have changed in an instant, very unfamiliar and sharp. In the past, when faced with such a major event, the usually introverted eldest son would have no choice but to ask himself what to do next, and then whether he was willing or unwilling, he would execute it meticulously. As the coronation ceremony had just ended, the newly revealed crown prince actually took the initiative to care about the next steps of the emperor and ministers, clearly planning something. And contrary to the norm, he rode his horse ahead and no longer followed his orders. Can a change in identity change a person's personality so quickly? It's possible, that's all I can explain. However, for the crown prince, confidence and initiative are not bad things. Being too dull and cowardly can actually lead to bad things. I hope that the crown prince, who is destined to be inseparable from him, can truly slightly increase his momentum and actively compete for the power that should belong to him. Whether the emperor is willing or not to see it, at least let the courtiers not be too disappointed, and also not let themselves be too disappointed. Qidong Palace is located on the east side of the Forbidden City, with Donghua Gate to the south and Empress Dowager's Rinshou Palace to the north. The architectural style here is a bit unique. Other palaces are all made of yellow glazed tiles, except for the green roof of the Qidong Palace. It is said that this is calculated based on the 5 elements technique. The east belongs to wood, and the Qidong Palace is specially prepared for the crown prince. Therefore, it is made green, indicating that the crown prince can grow and grow into a towering tree in the future, becoming the pillar of the country. Hong Tao is really unclear about whether this statement is true or not, and has not specifically inquired about it. In fact, he has just moved in, and the appointment of the crown prince is a major event for the court. He started preparing half a month in advance, and there are also 2 rehearsals during this period. Then the crown prince had to bid farewell to his mother, Wang Gongfei, who depended on each other. He only brought Wang An and 2 palace maids out of Qidong Palace and moved into this huge palace with a slight smell of paint and obvious hasty decoration. His Highness the Crown Prince returns to the palace. But today is a bit different. When Hong Tao rode his horse to the south gate of the Qidong Palace, all 3 palace gates were already open, and 4 or 5 eunuchs dressed in green robes and black gauze stood in 2 rows, singing loudly. Compared to the cold and desolate Qidong Palace in the past, this scene should be considered a welcome in the middle. But compared to other relatively normal palaces, there is still a significant gap in terms of number of people. It seems that even after being crowned as a crown prince, Emperor Wanli still does not want to repair the previous father-son divide and does not intend to treat him differently. Hong Tao didn't pay attention to these people, nor did he need to. After 20 years of exposure, he has become roughly familiar with royal etiquette. Although there is still a part that feels awkward to do, it cannot be ignored. How to treat eunuchs and palace maids, summarized in just 3 words, don't be a person. Except for eunuch leaders who hold important positions, the status of most ordinary eunuchs and palace maids is extremely low. Zhaozuiyuan.com Whether it's the eldest son or the crown prince, it's normal to hit and scold with a raised hand and open your mouth. If you kill someone in a hurry, it's just right. Afterwards, at most, you'll be called over by the empress and scolded without any pain or itching. On the contrary, being too polite can easily be criticized for causing confusion in social status and being unreasonable. On this point, Hong Tao prefers the Song dynasty. Although he also emphasizes etiquette and laws, officials only need to stand and salute when they see the emperor, and the people do not have to kowtow when they see officials. The problem of kowtowing originated from the Yuan dynasty, and the Ming dynasty inherited the Yuan system in many aspects, clearly distinguishing between high and low status and placing great emphasis on it. As a result, a lot of so-called rules were invented, which easily strengthened the problem of kowtowing. Wang'an, when things happen here, you can go to the Imperial Horse Guard and ask if these horses can be kept in the palace for breeding. Hong Tao turned a blind eye to the new eunuch and palace maid, instead caring about the horses sitting down. Riding horses was prohibited in the forbidden city of the Ming dynasty, but this palace complex was too large. It was nearly 1 kilometer long from north to south and more than 700 meters wide from east to west. Eunuchs and palace maids could use 11 routes, and if the emperor and imperial concubines wanted to stroll, they couldn't walk all-legged. According to regulations, there are several types of transportation allowed to be used in the forbidden city. The highest specification is called the Lu or Yulu, which is pulled by 2 elephants and decorated extremely luxurious. It is specifically designed for emperors to participate in large-scale events. Next, it is called a large chariot and a small chariot, which are respectively pulled by 8 horses and 4 horses. Going further down, it is called a walking carriage, which is carried by human labor and divided into 2 specifications. Winter and summer. The most common one is called Yu, which is a sedan chair. At the level of the eldest son of the emperor, in addition to jade chariots, walking chariots, and jade chariots can be used according to different needs. After becoming the crown prince, there will also be a luxury car pulled by an elephant, the golden horse, specifically designed for the highest level of outdoor activities. Qidong Palace II. You are listening at novelfull.audio. But after reaching adulthood at the age of 15, Hong Tao instructed Wang'an to go to the Imperial Horse Academy to select a few horses to prepare, and every time he left Qidong Palace, he chose to ride horses. Empress Wang specifically inquired about this matter, and Hong Tao's answer was very naive and cunning. It is said that I have read what is written in the book and intend to strictly follow the teachings of Emperor Taizu. Zhu Yuanzhang came from a poor background and spent most of his life fighting, and his archenemy, the Yuan, was not destroyed. After establishing his country, he did not want to be too quick and let go of the country. He hoped that his children and grandchildren would continue to maintain a brave and skilled fighting style, and he disliked not being old and frail, as well as women and children going out to ride chariots. However, this regulation was only maintained during the reign of Emperor Yongle Zhu Di and was gradually intentionally forgotten thereafter. Compared to riding a horse, whether it is a horse-drawn car or a sedan carried by a person, it is more comfortable to ride. Avoiding exposure to the wind and sun, not only do civil servants like it, but also military generals are eager to follow suit. Emperors throughout history also wanted to feel more comfortable, turning a blind eye to all such practices that violated the ancestral system. It can be seen that the ancestral system is not immutable, but mainly depends on whether the benefits are sufficient and whether it is worth changing. Hong Tao utilized his ancestral system, and the Ming dynasty claimed to rule the world with filial piety. He often took out ancestral laws and regulations to talk about things. Now that the eldest son wants to ride a horse according to the ancestral teachings, the queen not only cannot criticize but also has to shout out that the ancestral spirit has emerged and that there are successors to the country, making an unusual expression of satisfaction. Then a decree was issued to have the imperial horse supervisor prepare 5 imperial horses for Zhu Changluo to use at any time, but with one condition. When you want to go out, someone should be sent to the imperial horse supervisor to collect them, and they should not be placed in the Qidong Palace. Now the eldest son has become the crown prince, and the Qidong Palace has also been replaced by the Qidong Palace. Although it is still within the scope of the Forbidden City, its status has become much more independent, and its area has also increased significantly. It would be a bit troublesome to send someone to the Imperial Horse Guard outside the Forbidden City 15 minutes in advance each time you go out. Qian Suiyi does not need to worry about such small matters. There are 6 bureaus in the palace. The minister is in charge of the Imperial Seal and the Imperial Medicine bureaus, serving as a Languan. Zhou Yi has a delicate mind and is in charge of the Imperial Clothing and Food bureaus, serving as the bureau chief. Li Shizhi is in charge of the Military Affairs bureau, and Wang Guotai is skilled in horseback riding and riding bureaus, each serving as the bureau chief. Upon hearing this, Wang An took the reins of the horse and pointed to the 3 eunuchs standing in front of the palace gate, introducing their names, positions, and specialties one by one, waiting for further instructions from the crown prince. You can arrange it. Jianbing Bureau, East Palace, and Forbidden Army. Hong Tao didn't know anyone, let alone any instructions, and turned to walk towards the main hall, asking as he walked. Non-Forbidden Army, wielding armor, spears, swords, etc. required for palace ceremonial guards. Let's go down, I'm tired. Upon hearing this answer, the fleeting inspiration in my heart disappeared instantly. Just thinking about it, if someone in the imperial palace controlled the army, the emperor wouldn't be able to sleep even if it were his own son. However, this is not a big problem. The original plan did not include military advice. The first thing to consider now is not whether the Eastern Palace has military power, but who are the officials of the Zhan Mansion besides these eunuchs. Can we find some promising talents from them, and can we choose a few ourselves? Wang An left quietly, replaced by 2 palace maids who continued to serve the crown prince in changing clothes and washing up. When it comes to the most unaccustomed details of life after crossing over, it's not about eating, but dressing. What to do and wear is the most basic etiquette in the palace, even the lowest level of Wangman is no exception. For example, the 9 chapters gun uniform I'm wearing today, without anyone's help, I can't put it on or take it off by myself. There are as many as 5 or 6 layers inside and outside, combined with 9 imperial crowns, weighing a heavy weight of several pounds. It is equivalent to walking and standing with half a bag of noodles on your back at all times. Your Highness, are you tired? I know how to use the technique of pressing to relieve fatigue. The 2 palace maids are not very old, and their appearances are not particularly outstanding. They are just ordinary people with a straight and upright appearance. However, one of them had a smart eye and was very good at coming. Seeing the prince leaning against Arhat's couch, he looked a little depressed and immediately put forward a feasible suggestion. What's your name? Hong Tao had already closed his eyes and immediately opened one upon hearing this. Returning to your majesty the crown prince, my servant's milk name is Shir. The little palace maid took another step closer, bowed, and answered softly, her movements being very formal and orderly. Well, that's good. Let's go down first and come back later in the evening. Hong Tao closed his eyes again and gently waved his hand. He didn't accept the palace maid's kindness, nor did he completely refuse, leaving a button. You are really tireless, but your vision is a bit poor. If you can get some little black people from North Africa, you can try. When the little maid goes out, Hong Tao slowly opens his eyes, staring at the carved beams and painted rafters on the roof and murmurs softly. Since the day of reaching adulthood at the age of 15, similar plays have been performed countless times. The palace maids who took the initiative to send them to their homes in various ways have changed wave after wave. The purpose of searching for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com is nothing more than to find ways to get into their own beds. Zhu Changluo is not unattractive, but he cannot be considered handsome. He lacks a domineering aura and is still in a cold palace, which is not well liked by the emperor. Why are there so many palace maids rushing to the flames one after another? The answer is simple: the vast majority of them were sent by someone to seduce the eldest son into making mistakes. The issue of lifestyle is not a big deal for an ordinary prince. At most, he will be called upon by the empress to criticize him a few times and receive a severe penalty of pocket money. Especially after reaching the age of 15, all princes and princesses will be secretly taught about male and female affairs through books and pictures by designated eunuchs and palace maids, and even take them to the West Garden to observe animal interactions. But as the eldest son of the emperor, I really can't just find a palace maid to intern casually, at least not before the wedding. If such behavior is exposed, it will become a stain. Originally, Emperor Wanli didn't want to see him, and he was worried about not finding an excuse to replace the crown prince. How could he personally give him a handle? As for who sent these palace maids, Hong Tao was too lazy to inquire or investigate. Isn't it true that ancient people passed by clouds, and their bodies were not afraid of shadows tilting? In the current environment, as long as the Empress Dowager, and ministers are not left in despair, no one can touch themselves at all. Even if they jump and shout that they don't want to be the crown prince, they won't agree. Emperor Wanli has been fighting against the harem and outer court for more than 10 years for this matter, but in the end, it is still useless. The saying goes that the emperor has no personal matters. It is not up to him to decide who to appoint as the crown prince or emperor. He must gain the recognition of mainstream courtiers and the harem, otherwise he will not be able to fulfill his wishes even if he is stubborn to the death. But not taking action does not mean that Hong Tao has no waves in his heart. The ceremony of conferring the crown prince has been going on for half a month, but it is only the beginning. In the following period, similar ceremonies will need to be repeated 3 or 4 times. 8. Double happiness comes upon the door. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Firstly, the chief minister of the current dynasty led the cabinet to the Eastern Palace to pay homage, and at the same time, stamped a seal on the treasure book with the crown prince's seal. Then, they were presented to the civil and military officials at the Meridian Gate, which was considered a successful coronation of the crown prince. The next day, the new crown prince will enter the central palace to pay tribute to the current empress. Whether she is her biological mother or not, she must treat her as a biological mother and show filial piety, thanking her and the emperor for leaving their inheritance to her. The ceremony is still not simple. The next day, we will have to go to the Renshaw Palace to do this ritual again, but it will not be facing the Empress Dowager but the Empress Dowager. This time, we also need to bring the Queen and Birth Mother to thank the old lady together. It's been 3 times. Don't worry, it's not over yet. On a recent auspicious day, the Crown Prince will lead the people of the Eastern Palace to pay respects to their ancestors and worship the heavens and earth in the left temple and right community. The exact process is still unclear, and we need to wait for officials from the Ministry of Rites to report. Anyway, no matter how simple it is, it won't be too simple. It takes a whole day to tinker, and it's the most exhausting for the knees and waist. All of them are big gifts of 5 or even 8 bows. Anyone with high blood pressure or cardiovascular diseases can easily get hung up. See, everything you do needs to have a good body first. Otherwise, even if you become the crown prince, you may leave before sending your father away. Being a timid target for over a decade that could be killed by competitors or discarded at any time, and ultimately not receiving inheritance, what an injustice. By the way, after the coronation ceremony has gone through the process, it cannot be relaxed. Didn't you hear from Wangnan? Now both the inner and outer courts are busy selecting a crown princess for themselves. The ceremony of the crown prince's grand wedding is probably not much simpler than conferring titles, and it may be even more complicated. The most troublesome thing is that after the big wedding, I am no longer alone in the East Palace, and I need to add a woman who is both unfamiliar and intimate, but also has to be guarded against. To ask what the highest level of disguise is, it must be 24 hours a day, and one outfit can last for several years or even more. The difficulty is too high, and it also tests one's mental and endurance abilities. Faced with a series of tests, Hong Tao couldn't help but extend his middle finger towards the roof. Tainima is wicked. So far, I have never been satisfied with a journey. Either I am too poor or too busy, or I am too dangerous. I have been constantly changing my ways and causing trouble. Alas, with a knife at the beginning of the word ren, the ancients never deceived me. But if the emperor cannot provoke it, can aliens provoke it? To save my life and make my future life easier, I must grit my teeth and endure these difficulties. There is no other way. However, Hong Tao underestimated the enthusiasm of the harem for the prince's marriage. He thought it would take a year and a half to hold the wedding, but the dust settled in less than a month. In fact, since the enthronement of the crown prince was approved by the emperor, the work of selecting a crown princess also began, but he was unaware of it. The empress chose the original wife of the crown prince, named Gua and Shui, from Daxing County, Shuntian Prefecture, northern Jili. Speaking of which, it's quite fate. The soul inside the crown prince is a person from the capital city, who has traveled for hundreds of years and married a wife, but is actually from the same hometown. The Gua family inherited the position of commander-in-chief of the royal guards, and their father worked in the royal guards, making a decent living. She herself is knowledgeable and reasonable, with a slight understanding of music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. She is quite graceful and has a proper demeanor. Overall, she is quite good. Of course, according to the standards of the Ming dynasty, if asked to be evaluated by Hong Tao, it can only be said that the little girl has not yet opened her mouth. After all, she is not yet 15 years old, and in later generations she will be a junior high school student. No matter how developed she is, she cannot be judged by the standards of a woman. In fact, there was not just one Gua who was sent to the Eastern Palace. She was a crown princess who had been openly married and conferred titles, accompanied by 2 equally aged attendants. They all come from good families, one surnamed Wang and the other surnamed Liu, and are also from Shuntian Prefecture. This is the rule of the Ming dynasty's crown prince's grand wedding. It's not just about marrying one wife, but also marrying one crown princess and 2 attendants, one wife and 2 concubines. In the evil old society, one must carefully understand and then criticize with determination. No matter how many people he marries, as the crown prince, he can only passively accept it. Not to mention resistance, no one even listens to the voices of opposition. Hong Tao continued to pretend to be weak and wooden, and was manipulated like a puppet for a month. Finally, in the spring of the 30th year of the Wanli reign, he completed a major event in his life and got married. Although the process is mostly helpless and boring, following the principle that everything has 2 sides, I also found some fun in boredom to enlighten myself. For example, experiencing the process of a royal wedding in person, don't be reluctant. This thing is really beyond the reach of ordinary people, it can be considered a gain. What is the process of getting married for the crown prince of the Ming dynasty, similar to the emperor? 2 words, tedious. The first step, of course, is to select candidates, which are usually the responsibility of the queen, and the imperial palace is equipped with a gymnastics office. The general idea is to inform the whole country about the crown prince's decision to choose a daughter.in.law, to be recommended by officials from various regions, and finally gathered at the internal office for preliminary screening. Hand over the candidates who have entered the semi-final stage to several officials for review, determine the list of candidates who will enter the final stage, and finally let the queen decide. Choosing the right person, the next step is called lottery. The internal official, who serves as the best man, also known as the envoy, went to the woman's house to propose marriage with a live goose from the Shuyuan website www.chaoshuyuan.com. At this point, the female parent could not immediately agree and had to pretend to be polite, saying that their daughter was crooked and dared not enter the palace to serve the crown prince, and so on. It was only after repeated insistence from the bridesmaid that they reluctantly agreed. At this point, we entered the third step of asking for names. Listen, it's quite interesting for ancient people to come and propose marriage without even knowing their name. In addition to the name, there are also 8 characters for the birth date. Come back and find the various immortals to calculate. Hey, the 8 characters don't conflict. That's the 4th step, Magi. The wedding has only now entered the main topic, transitioning from being practical to practical, and the next step is to give a dowry. What should be given should also be handled according to the rules by the Ministry of Rights and internal officials. It is not possible to give more or less, and this step is called collecting taxes. Once the female party is conscripted, they cannot go back on their word, otherwise it will be a great crime of bullying the monarch. Accepting the betrothal gift means that both parents should consider which day they will get married. Different from the common people, many rights of marriage with the royal family will be deprived. For example, the royal family the final say the date of marriage, which is called the request period. When my son gets married, even if the father is not happy, he cannot completely relax. The next step is for him to personally appear, called dipping ring, which sounds the same as standing on the street. One day, Emperor Wanli sat impatiently on the imperial extreme hall, putting on a very important appearance. The crown prince stood cautiously and trembling on top of the Dan emperor, surrounded by a group of officials and officials. First, offer wine as a sacrifice to the heavens, and then listen to the emperor's admonitions from elders. The speaking time is less than 1/10 of the time required to put on a show. Amidst the sound of drums and music, Hong Tao couldn't hear what the emperor was saying. He only stared at the eyes of the ceremonial officer, kneeling and getting up, feeling like a walking corpse. Of course, this sin was not born in vain. In the end, a golden book was obtained, marking the completion of the crown prince's coronation. Not only did she have a formal title, but she also had to earn a salary. 9 crown princesses and selected attendants. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After completing these steps, the wedding can be considered as entering the substantive stage. It's time to go and welcome the bride, which is called a wedding welcome. According to the pre-planned auspicious day, set up the crown prince's tent outside the door of his in-laws, and arrange for some eunuchs and officials from the Eastern Palace to guard it. The next morning, the crown prince, wearing a crown coat, sat in a golden carriage surrounded by a group of honor guards and bravely rushed to the woman's house. Most of the wedding ceremonies were completed in the barracks, and ultimately the new bride and groom returned to the Eastern Palace by sitting on the golden altar together. According to the customs of later generations, when the bride is brought back, the wedding banquet should begin. But the royal family did not have it. After returning to the palace, the crown prince and his consort changed into clothes and hats, sat across the table, and drank a toast under the service of a group of palace maids and eunuchs, called Hekan. The last step is to go and pay respects to the emperor, empress, noble consort, and courtiers. At this time, regardless of whether they are willing or not, everyone, including Empress Sheng, will laugh. Regardless of whether it is sincere or not, everyone should congratulate. The historian in charge of recording will write and draw on the living notes, recording all events and conversations that occur at this time. Fortunately, the crown prince did not have a daily routine, otherwise Hong Tao would have to find a way to change his plan. There are always people following by all day, recording every move at any time. No matter how much you pretend, you have to reveal your true feelings. I know you are waiting for literacy, so I have copied a book here. If you are unsure, you can ask. Those who learn first will receive double their monthly salary. When all the programs were completed and the bride was welcomed back to the Eastern Palace, Hong Tao did not immediately enter the cave room to create a villain. Instead, he took out a book and handed it to the crown princess and 2 selected attendants. Then, under the gaze of confusion, fear, curiosity, helplessness, and many other eyes, he turned and left. Too small to speak, this is the main reason not to enter the bridal chamber. In case of pregnancy, with one's own lifespan, the son may never have a chance to ascend the throne except for rebellion, which is a secondary reason. Now we can only procrastinate day by day. If it gets to the ears of the Empress and Empress Dowager and they can't get past it, we can only grit our teeth, but we still need to take measures as much as possible. As for the content of that book, I copied it from multiple ancient mathematical books in my spare time, which is more inclined towards popularizing mathematical knowledge. It can also be considered a game with back and forth, or a way of communication, so as not to make them feel neglected. Now he is no longer the poor prince of Qidong Palace, but the crown prince of Dongong who established the mansion and opened the yam. Every year, he can obtain 50,000 stones of rice, 25,000 guan of banknotes, 40 pieces of brocade, 300 pieces of silk, 100 pieces of gauze, 500 pieces of silk, 1,000 pieces of winter and summer cloth, 2,000 taels of cotton, 200 pieces of salt, 1,000 kilograms of tea, and 50 horses of grass every month from the Ministry of Revenue. You no longer have to respect the people around you like before, and are fully qualified to use incentives to make them serve you. Qian Sui Yi. Just as he returned to his study and sat down, a soft call came from the door. I'm a bit irritable, it's okay, just calm down. Today, I saw Your Majesty holding something about the size of a palm. Have you ever seen it? Faced with Wang An's questioning gaze, Hong Tao didn't explain why he didn't enter the bridal chamber, but asked about another matter. When I went to visit the Queen in the afternoon, something caught my attention. It is a clock, to be precise, a rectangular small seat clock, held and played with by Emperor Wanli. The Ming dynasty definitely did not manufacture small mechanical clocks, let alone use the 12-hour clock system, so its source must and can only come from Europe. Whether it was brought back by merchants or paid tribute by Europeans needs to be understood. Returning to Qian Sui Yi, the item that Your Majesty has taken is a tribute from the Western monk, called Zimming Bell. The mechanism inside this item is extremely exquisite, with a bell ringing every half hour. There is also a relatively large one, which is placed separately in the Shouhuang Hall. Where is the West monk? Upon hearing the word, West monk, Hong Tao roughly understood who it was or who it was. Since the late 15th century, when Portuguese navigators discovered a sea route to the east, the Vatican has never given up on religious infiltration into the mysterious East. After decades or even centuries of exploration, Western missionaries not only found India and Southeast Asian countries, but also landed in the Ming dynasty and Japan. If calculated in this way, the ringing bell in the hands of Emperor Wanli should have been brought by them, and the Western monk in Wang An's mouth must be the Western missionary who came to pay homage. In the original plan, Hong Tao really didn't think of these devout religious fanatics, mainly because they were too narrow-minded. However, it doesn't seem too late to think about it now. If we can make good use of them, they may become a great help and cover. I can go to the 6th Science Corridor to inquire, but I don't know why Qian Sui Yi is paying attention to the Western monk. Wang An was a bit confused when asked. On his wedding night, the crown princess and 2 selected attendants ignored him. What was the purpose of inquiring about the whereabouts of the Western monk in the evening? But the response was still given, and he really didn't know where the Western monk who paid tribute was. If he had to know, he could only ask. Tomorrow, I will go and ask. This palace is going to learn the method of ringing the bell and make a fight for the Empress Dowager, and Empress Dowager. Yes, what's the point of being so busy searching for the Western monk? The dull crown prince was a little excited, not only did his eyes sparkle, but his voice even spoke a little louder. Qian Sui Yi is pure filial, should we also make a fight for His Majesty? Wang An's mouth twitched from this answer, knowing that the crown prince was talking nonsense, but he couldn't refuse to do it. He could only suggest slightly changing the list of gift givers. Even if there is resentment towards the current emperor in my heart, I should not express it so openly. It seems that we still need to be careful and protect it. The crown prince's title is not only royal, but also a meal ticket for the latter half of his life. At this position, one can only prosper and suffer, there is no other way to choose. Then make 2 more and send them to concubine Zheng. Sure enough, when he heard that he was going to make a self-honing bell for his father, the crown prince's expression became dull again, but in the end, he still chose to surrender as usual. Extremely. It's getting late. Xian Suiyi should have gone to bed early. Tomorrow morning, the Wenhua Hall will hold a small scripture banquet, and the scholars will start speaking. The crown prince's answer and expression made Wang An feel a bit amused. Leaving aside whether it was so easy to make the self-ringing bell, even if it was actually made, there would be no reason for servants to give it away. Forget it, let's not talk about these annoying topics anymore. The more troublesome thing is still tomorrow. I don't know how the extremely picky cabinet scholars feel when they see the crown prince with such behavior. Will the professor be disappointed in a few days and leave, so the position of the crown prince cannot be guaranteed? Compared to the future of the entire Eastern Palace, it's not a big deal for the crown princess and her attendants to be neglected. Since the crown prince says he's in a bad mood, it's not too late to have sex again another day. Wang Gonggong, Qiansui. Just as he left the main hall, a person walked out of the well pavilion and approached to inquire in a low voice. Zhou Jurchen, your highness is a bit tired today and has already gone to bed. You should also go rest. Regarding this colleague, although they all come from the internal study, several years have passed, and Wang An is not very familiar with them, so he has nothing to communicate with and just perfunctory. Alas, the trees want to be quiet, but the wind doesn't stop. When Zoe left the yard, Wang An slowly walked towards his living-ear room and sighed softly as he walked. Accompanying the eldest son for 7 years, I worked diligently every day and always thought about him. Today, I finally achieved some results, which is not in vain. However, the performance of the newly appointed crown prince is somewhat worrying. Saying it's foolish, it's definitely not right to look for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Although the crown prince's usual performance is not particularly outstanding, he never provokes trouble and is very patient. He is not a person without any ulterior motives. It's not foolish to say that when faced with a good opportunity to curry favor with the emperor, one never knows how to flatter and improve the father-son relationship. It's not right to say stupid. The crown prince was able to successfully complete his daily teaching of books such as The Enlightenment of Sound and Rhythm and Zhenguang Xian 1, with neither fast nor slow progress. You must be smart, I can't tell. That crappy handwriting is really hard to catch the eye. Everyone seems to frown and pout, with a face full of displeasure, practicing every day without seeing any progress. When it comes to being weak and incompetent, the crown prince's expression when he witnessed his execution of palace maids and eunuchs with a cane seemed frightened, but his pulse remained unusually stable. My body is even stronger. On weekdays, besides reading, writing, and painting, I run in circles in the palace, starting from a quarter-hour run and enduring all seasons. And he has developed a very peculiar body technique without a teacher, saying that boxing is not like fighting, but also not like fighting. Although I haven't fought with anyone, I can put dozens of pounds of fine sand into a cloth bag and casually throw it over my head, doing it dozens of times before stopping, which is similar to Mongolian wrestling. You have to be brave, but in the face of various harassment from the Qidong Palace, you never dare to report to the Empress and Empress Dowager. Even if you are treated slowly by more prestigious officials, you still ignore them, like a damp cotton ball without any rebound. It can be said that being neglected for nearly 20 years, and finally being crowned as the crown prince, is a great joy in every way. Now that we have the crown princess again, even if we are not overjoyed and forgetful, we should still be a bit excited by the long drought and sweet dew. As a result, the newly appointed crown prince didn't even say a word of goodwill, as if an old monk had settled down, without any youthful vigor or drive. Instead, he asked questions about some trivial matters. It is really difficult to estimate whether it will be a blessing or a curse afterwards. 10 Classics Banquet. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Wenhua Hall was temporarily used as a resting place for the emperor during his reign due to a fire in the three main halls during the Yongle period. After the three main halls were repaired, they were converted into the residence of the Crown Prince Regent. Its roof, like the Qidong Palace, was replaced with green glazed tiles. During the reign of Emperor Jiajing, it became the location of the emperor's feast, and the glazed tiles were once again replaced with yellow. Now the first crown prince of the Wanli dynasty has been officially conferred the title, but at the age of weak crown, he has not been enlightened. Regardless of whether the emperor is willing or not, the courtiers rush to make up for the crown prince's lessons according to their ancestral system. As a result, the Wenhua Hall became the place where the crown prince held his banquets. Jin Yan is said to have originated in the Han dynasty and was later imitated by various dynasties. Its original intention was to give lectures to the emperor, which belonged to on-the job education, just like some future CEOs and leaders who went to Changjiang University or party school for further education while working. However, the only student at the Jingyan banquet was the emperor, and there were a lot of teachers with very high quality. They were either prime ministers or prime ministers, and at least they had to be highly respected academic authorities. Similarly, the leaders of the CEO are busy with daily tasks and cannot attend classes all day. There are also not every day's feasts, and they usually start speaking whenever the emperor has free time. The problem is that there are not many emperors in the world who love to study from the bottom of their hearts. It would be great if they had free time to accompany their concubines in the harem. No one wants to hear a group of old men talking and criticizing each other. As a result, in the Ming dynasty, this training class became a ritual similar to ancestor worship, used to showcase to outsiders how diligent and hardworking the emperor was in his studies. It became a mere formality and had a fixed time. It was held on the second day of each month, known as the Great Sutra Feast. There should be small ones when there is a big one. In addition to the large scripture feast for the emperor to study, there are also some small scripture feasts. From the name, you can tell that this kind of activity is definitely not prepared for the emperor, but there is only one person who is qualified to attend classes in the Forbidden City and can be compared to the emperor, the crown prince. That's right, at the same time as the crown prince's wedding, the courtiers took turns reporting and forced Emperor Wanli to agree to hold a small banquet. They may be well-intentioned, but they have suffered the crown prince, which is a bit like parents. In short, it is for the sake of their own good. As children, whether they are willing or not, they have to continue. On the second day of his wedding, Hong Tao had to wake up at dawn, set aside the bride, put on a 9-seam leather robe, sat on a walking carriage, and rushed to the Wenhua Gate on time to attend his entrance ceremony. The Wenhua Hall is not a building, but a complex of buildings. There are 2 courtyards in front and behind, with the main entrance facing south called the Wenhua Gate. There are 2 main halls in the front yard, Wenhua and Zhujing, and 2 side halls in the east and west, Benren and Ge. Passing through the main hall and heading north, you will reach the Wenyuan Pavilion, which is the royal library. This design is quite convenient for teaching. If the professor's content is controversial, university scholars don't need to argue with students. They can go to the library to search for materials and generally find the correct answer. Unlike the grand banquets that Wang An talked about all the way, there were no imperial nobles or 6 ministers outside the Wenhua Gate, and even basic exhibition officials, attendants, offerings, and tribute officials were nowhere to be seen, only 4 small eunuchs and a small sedan chair. Xian Suiyi, he is the head assistant of Shengu Lao. Wang An was somewhat surprised to see this scene, but more awkwardly. It is obvious that the emperor did not attach any importance to the education of the crown prince, and even did not intend to make a pretentious pretense. But this has had a significant impact on the crown prince's heart, and the only thing that can be said is the small sedan. Fortunately, the courtiers did not fall into the well with the emperor, which can be considered fortunate in misfortune. Stay outside. But Hong Tao showed no displeasure at all, as if nothing had happened. He ordered the officials of the East Palace behind him to stop and walked slowly towards the door. After standing still slightly, I first looked towards the side halls on both sides and saw that the doors and windows were tightly closed before continuing towards the Wenhua Hall. Shen Yiguan, a thin old man with white beard and hair, is not tall and appears to have entered the age of antiquity. There are many old age spots on his face and back of his hands. But the eyes were still clear and the speech was also quite clear, with a slight southern accent. Bachelor Shen, student Zhu Changluo. After bowing to the old man, Hong Tao walked alone to the north of the desk and sat down, his eyelids lowered and he stopped speaking. This cabinet's first deputy grand scholar has some information in his memory. He was a late bloomer, and in the second year of the Longqing reign, 1568, at the age of nearly 40, he passed the imperial examination and was selected as a scholar in the 3rd class, barely squeezing into the Hanlin Academy. He began to rank and determine his qualifications, waiting for one day to be appointed by the imperial court. Compared to his colleagues in the Hanlin Academy, Shen has always had a bit of a carefree attitude. He neither seeks connections nor deliberately befriends influential people. It seems that after becoming a civil servant, he is satisfied and ready to spend the rest of his life lying down and living a peaceful life. After lying down for 6 years, Emperor Muzong Zhu Ziyuan died alive and welcomed Emperor Shenzong Zhuijuan. In the second year of the Wanli reign, 1574, the opportunity came and I was assigned a good job as an examiner. Although the actual power of this job may not be significant, as long as it is handled properly, there is still a chance to show off. No one among the ministers in the court jumped out of a crevice in a stone, and there must be their family, relatives, friends, and fellow countrymen among the candidates. As the chief examiner, if you express a little goodwill, you may be able to be understood by some big shot. As a result, there was indeed a relative of a prominent figure in this interview, the eldest son of Zhang Juzhen, the head of the cabinet. All the other examiners were eager to curry favor, but Shen Yi acted impartially, leaving this son of the chief assistant in vain. Just when others thought Shen Yiguan was going to be unlucky, this old man from Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com was actually promoted. Although he is just a Hanlin Academy editor with little real power, he has also made progress in his level. As for why Zhang Juzhen didn't retaliate, it could be because he forgot too many things, or it could be because he was too lazy to entangle with a petty official of no rank. As Zhang Galao, as long as he wants to interfere, he can always give his son a top few in the second tier. Anyway, Shen Yiguan escaped a disaster, but he didn't learn a lesson and continued to accelerate on the path of sucking to death. 3 years later, Zhang Juzhen's father passed away. According to the Ming dynasty's ancestral system, no matter what position he held, he had to resign from his position and return home to observe filial piety. He could only return after 3 years to wait for the distribution of work. At this time, the reform of the Wanli dynasty was in full swing, and if one suddenly left for 3 years, all the efforts of the previous years would be in vain. So Zhang Juzhen, with the consent of Empress Dowager Li and the emperor, directed and performed a small farce to steal love. He first wrote a speech and submitted it to the emperor, and then found a few colleagues with good relationships to submit a memorial to the emperor, presenting facts and reasoning. The core idea is that there can be no one in the Ming dynasty, but one cannot live without Zhang Gu, not for a day. With this reason in mind, the emperor can issue an edict to seize favor. Refusing Zhang Juzhen's resignation on the grounds of official business is fully in line with the regulations, and it can also demonstrate the character of the emperor and his subjects. In order to make the script more exciting, Zhang Juzhen argued for the first time without agreeing to the emperor's request for love, and insisted on going home to be filial. After repeated resignations and attempts to stay, the Empress Dowager was finally alarmed. The old lady issued a decree to help the emperor persuade the chief minister to prioritize the country and the country. At this moment, Zhang Juzhen reluctantly and against his will, disregarding filial piety and sacrificing his own family for the sake of the face of the Empress Dowager and the emperor, continued to hold on to his position as the head of the cabinet and devoted himself to the great Ming dynasty,